First News with Keeler in the morning on WIBX and WIBX950.com.
I would say the same thing. I couldn't name an ELO song, but everything you played I had heard of before. Also, a listener saying this morning, it's great that you have on Ryan Nobles from the ELO, the Extreme Left Orchestra.
Ryan, you're not
Sometimes
laughing.
I think when Jeff nails me on those, he always blames it on somebody emailing or calling. I kind of think those are his jokes.
Do you think he just doesn't want to take credit for it?
He wants to say,
that's my assumption, yeah.
Listener Bob from wherever.
Yeah. Andrew, check the messages. Did we get a message from somebody who said that?
All right, Ryan, what do you think on this?
I'll fast forward to the end.
Oh, yeah, Rick
Ryan,
in Utica.
Ryan, you're absolutely correct. I kind of said that on my own.
Yeah, you called it.
I had a feeling, yeah.
All right. Okay, let's talk about this situation with the voting bill. And, boy, I got to tell you, when Republicans are talking about it today, it was like this was the end of legitimate voting, and that's why they voted against it. And they were able to stop it, of course.
You know, the parties are so far apart on so many issues, Bill, but this voting rights situation is, boy, if you talk to a Democrat and it's the end of the republic, if this bill doesn't pass, democracy itself is in danger of going away forever.
Yep.
You talk to Republicans about it, if the voting rights bill passes, it basically opens the floodgates to every level of fraud that could possibly happen. This was one of those situations where they were so far apart. There was no possible way that a Republican was going to vote for it. I think the bigger issue here is that Democrats have a problem because the base of their party, particularly the progressive base of their party, is considers this their highest priority. And where some of the moderate Democrats are paying lip service to it, I think they think it's a good messaging bill. It will encourage their people to come out and vote in 2022 if they can say Republicans blocked it. Progressives actually want to see something tangible pass. And, I have a story this morning that I tweeted that's on CNN.com that's all about the progressive backlash to the fact that they feel specifically that President Biden hasn't done enough to make voting rights a key priority. And the problem here comes in that, I think a lot of Democrats are like, well, we did our best to get voting rights over the finish line. It didn't happen.
Yep.
Let's move on to the next thing. Well, progressives are like, we're not going to move on to the next thing, and that being this bipartisan infrastructure deal. And there were two progressive Democrats in particular in the House who said they're not going to vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill if the voting rights legislation doesn't get passed. And that's a real problem for President Biden and Nancy Pelosi, because remember, they only have a 4-seat margin in the House. So this could be a bigger problem for Democrats down the road that they weren't able to get anything done yesterday.
So the thorn in Biden's side is obviously the Republicans who are kind of battling against his agenda, some Republicans. But then even worse than that, it's his own party, the far left, the progressives, will not allow him to get what he wants to get done. Because it's not far left enough for them.
Oh, my goodness. It is such a narrow margin that President Biden has success. And that seems counterintuitive because if you just look at it from a 30,000-foot view, you're like, well, the Democrats own the White House. They've got control of the Senate and the House. So they should be able to pass whatever they want.
Yeah.
But having that filibuster option in the Senate gives Republicans enormous power to block almost every piece of legislation that Biden wants to put through. And the other problem that they have is these infrastructure negotiations are a perfect example of this. Every time you win over a Republican, you likely lose a progressive Democrat. So, if you go win over 10 Republicans, that means that legislation has been changed so much that the Democrats on the far left may not be willing to vote for it. So, and that's almost a bigger problem in the House than it is in the Senate, because it can maybe afford to lose one or two Democrats in the Senate, and most of the Democrats in the Senate are closer to the middle. It's a bigger problem in the House because those, with only 4 seats at risk, and progressive caucus is around 15 or 20 members now, with about 5 or 6 of them that are pretty hardcore and don't necessarily kowtow to leadership. They have a much different constituency and aren't afraid to buck their leadership. You're right. It's just such a very difficult position that Biden finds himself in, especially with an agenda that is as ambitious as he laid out when he took office in January.
All right. So, in a nutshell, What is Republicans? What is the Republican problem with voting? I mean, why are voters being kicked off? These people they're being kicked off the voting rolls. Are these people who illegally signed up to vote? Is there a gray area there? And then on the other side, why do Democrats have such a problem with some sort of an identification to authenticate a person's vote?
Right. So I think that voting rights and election reform is so similar to immigration in that the far reaches of both parties have control of the messaging, and both sides feel if they give an inch to come up with some sort of common sense legislation that would solve all the problems associated with it, if they could just come to that consensus, you could actually get something done.
Yeah.
But so much, special interest on both sides that are just unwilling to push, that if you concede even a little bit, it blows the whole thing up.
Right.
And, I think that we do have a problem here. We can't ignore the fact President Trump's big lie about winning the election has led to overreach in Republican-controlled states to limit access to the voting rolls. But I also think Democrats on the other side, aren't willing to put in some common sense level of, if identification is the right word, but just something to make sure that we're tracking to make sure that people that are supposed to vote are the ones voting. But, I do think we can't forget when it comes to voting that it is a fundamental right that the Constitution protects. You are born with the right to vote. You don't need to earn the right to vote. You shouldn't have to jump any kind of obstacle to vote. And in some of these states, Republicans are making it harder to vote by, putting barriers in the way that might seem simple to us. Like, I think that probably most of your listeners think that, getting identification,
everybody's got a driver's
license.
license.
Have to do.
Right.
But that could be a barrier for someone, and Democrats argue that there should be no barrier in order to cast a ballot.
All right. Well, again, I don't understand because, the reality is probably 99% of the people that vote in our area could easily hand over a driver's license to say, yeah, this is me, versus putting down your signature, which mine is degraded over the years significantly. Doesn't look anything like the first time I voted when I was 18. So it is hard.
I think the other side of that, though, is you have to look at what the real consequences are of not forcing people to have a voter ID. Like, is there the real opportunity for massive fraud if you said that people didn't have to present an ID? You still need to know all of the basic information,
right.
The demographic information about who you are when you go to cast a ballot.
Right.
And just think about that practically. If I were a guy that was going to go vote on behalf of X amount of people, how many could I even do that successfully? I'd have to know who they are. I'd have to know where they vote. I have to know that they're not going to vote. Could I do that on a level that could tilt the scales in one way or the other? It's just not.
We're losing our TV audience here, but go ahead if you want to.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that point, but it's fraud on a major level or an impactful level. I mean, we had an election here. It was decided by what? How many votes decided Tenny Brindisi?
It was under, I believe, under 100, right?
And I just don't know why we'd want to allow any fraud.
The thing is, though, what he's saying, though, is the reality is, in order to already, at least in New York State, in order to vote, like when I voted yesterday in the primary in my, you got to go. I walk into the building. You've got to walk. There are like 5 different districts, so you got to know which name you're going in under. You got to go to that proper table. I mean, and if anything is wrong in the process, you don't get to vote. So
that's even before you offer up your ID, right?
That is correct. Right here, yeah.
That's if you go to the wrong table, they say you can't vote.
You wouldn't be able to vote at the wrong table. No, that's not your right district. I'm sorry, we don't have you here. You can't
I see
vote.
What you're saying. I thought if you walked up and said, "Hi,
you got to go to the right place." I mean, obviously, I give my name. They direct me to where I'm supposed to go. But I walk in and I can never remember which table I'm supposed to go to, which district I live in. So I'm just saying that.
And I think the other two. The last point I make: a lot of us, we only view the situation from our own personal perspective.
That is true.
And for a lot of people, especially if you live in upstate New York, like I did for most of my life, even in portions of Virginia that I lived in, The voting process was really easy. I walked in, told them my name, showed them my ID, went in, cast my ballot.
Yeah, some parts of the country, it's not. I'm out of time. I got to go. Ryan, I appreciate it, but some parts of the country, it's not so easy. You're right. We use our own experience. Ryan, we'll do it again next week. Thank you. Enjoy the week.
All right, thanks, guys.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks.